Hello, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. We have gotten to, again, our favorite part of the month, be a digital ally. We're here today to talk about accessibility checkers. So before we begin, we do have a link for you to access the slides for today. Now, these are slides that I can't fully guarantee accessibility on them right now. We will have better formatted ones up on our website later, but if you just can't wait, go ahead and go to this bit.ly link. So it's going to be bit.ly/ and it's going to be capital A, the number 11, and then Y, capital C for the word checkers, and then BADA will all be capitalized. So it's a bit.ly/ A11Y checkers BADA with the A and the C and ally checkers, and then BADA, of course, all capitalized. All right. There we go. So just some quick introductions today for the crew here that's here. Of course, I am Jay McKay, Director of Community Programs here at Knowbility. For those that don't know me, I'm a white woman in her early 40s. I have short brown hair, and today I'm wearing my big, huge gaming headset microphone. And I'll pass it over to Melissa.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Melissa Green. I'm joining you from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I am a white woman in my early 40s. I have red hair and freckles, also wearing a giant headset. Looking forward to learning with you today.
All right, Julianne.
Hi, I'm Julianne King. I'm a community engagement specialist coming from Austin, Texas at Knowbility. I have brownish red hair with a white woman and brown eyes. Not that you can tell from the picture if you were able to see it.
And Erica.
There we go. Oops. Sorry, guys. There we go. Here's my camera. I'm Erica Braverman. I'm a community engagement specialist. This is kind of a bittersweet data for me because this is my last one in an official capacity, although I will be coming back as a volunteer for future datas. Jay is already nodding her head. Thank you. In my new role, so I'm not leaving you all. I'll just be in I'll have a different label. Rather than community engagement specialist, but I am a white woman in my 30s. I have glasses and brown hair. Today it's in a ponytail, and usually I'm joining you from Austin, but I'm actually popping in from vacation in Waxahachie, Texas.
Excellent, thank you. All right. So thank you again for joining us. So we're just going to give you a quick overview of our agenda today. First, of course, we always do a little BADA review or overview for those that are new and joining us for the first time. And then next, we're really going to dive into our topic, which is, of course, our accessibility checkers. We're going to go a little bit about really talking about what they can and cannot do. We're actually going to look at a couple different types of checkers and really kind of walk you through some tips and tricks and what to be looking for when you are using those different checkers, how to interpret those results, and then of course looking at resources and next steps. So what's really exciting about today is we, again, for all BADAs, we really want to kind of span the scope of experience and knowledge for everyone. So we wanted to make sure we gave enough information for those of us that maybe are not familiar with any kind of website coding or anything like that. But, you want to start being able to learn about these things and understand, if somebody's using a website checker or accessibility checker, what are they looking for? But then also we are providing some resources for those that want to go, into the woods, so to speak, or a little deeper into the weeds. All right, so just some housekeeping today. We always thank you for letting us be a part of your journey. That's always the case with accessibility. It is a journey for everyone. If you have questions, please type them in the chat. We'll always kind of be checking them periodically as we go if we feel it's something that we're talking about at that moment. And of course, there will be an opportunity usually at the end for people to jump on the mic as well. So feel free as questions come, put them in the chat. We will always be looking over those, see if there's anything that we're addressing immediately, or if not, we'll try and cover it at the end. Just to let you know about some of our accessibility features available during our sessions, we always will make sure that the auto captions are available through Zoom. And always, if there are additional features that you require, such as like American Sign Language interpretation or live human captioning, we always ask that those be asked for in advance when you're registering through your ticketing system. And usually we ask that you register a few days in advance. That way we can make sure we can have those people on hand. So, and as always, please ask for help. Do not be shy with your questions. This is always a fun group because we're all here to learn and grow together. All right, so just very briefly about Knowbility. So we were founded in 1999. We are a nonprofit that is based in Austin, Texas, but really we do operate globally. Melissa and I are both in Alabama, but actually in 2 different cities. We have staff members that are all over the country. And our mission, of course, is to create an inclusive digital world for people with disabilities, and really looking at ways to educate, bring awareness and advocacy to that. And as just a reminder, part of our mission is through our community programs. And we try to make sure that all of these are provided free or to little cost to everyone. And we do ask, if possible, to please donate. So going to knowbility.org/donate really helps with all of our different programs, such as the Accessibility Internet Rally, our web accessibility competition, Access U, which is our conference that's coming up in the spring, our Access Works program, which is our usability testing, K-12 digital accessibility. This is different resources and trainings available to teachers and staff and parents on how to create inclusive learning environments. And then, of course, programs like Be a Digital Ally. All right. So again, for those of you that might be new to BADA, we always want to make sure that we give everybody some background knowledge. So we want to go over the definition of accessibility and what it actually means to be accessible. When you think of the word accessible, sometimes people think of being available or being at reach for somebody, right? It's accessible, I can get to it. But that's not necessarily the accessible we're talking about. What we're talking about is, for something to be accessible, people with disabilities must be able to access and utilize something as fully and as independently as someone without a disability. Okay, so can they hear and see the content? Do they know where to go, what to do, or what to expect? If they're navigating on a website, right? Are they able to do that? Can they independently navigate using their preferred tools? So if somebody doesn't use a mouse and keyboard, if they're using some type of assistive technology, can they use those tools to navigate to where they need to go? And can they independently complete those tasks and explore all the areas? Again, maybe having to use their preferred tools. And then lastly, can they fully participate in an authentic manner? So looking at that, that's really what we're talking about. We've provided a couple of links down at the bottom from the w3.org, as well as the aim.cas.org, to really dive into, again, that idea of when we're talking about accessibility, what that means to us. All right, so I mentioned accessibility. I mentioned a little bit about design. So we want to, again, review about why it's so important for things to be designed inclusively. This number of 15% comes to us from the World Health Organization, from their report in 2011. So 15% of the world's population lives with some form of a disability. Now, that's how the WHO defines disability. And there are many people who may not even consider themselves to be disabled as defined by the World Health Organization. And so that's why it's important to think about, when you're designing, not to just think of maybe one particular population or one particular type of disability, right? We want to make sure we're really looking at it from a large scope. And then lastly, there are people who are just going to benefit from accessibility who may not have a disability. You know, think about how many people prefer to use captions nowadays, or just having good color contrast when they're looking at text on a screen, or you know, simple clear language in terms of like instructions and directions. These are all things we all benefit from, whether or not we have a disability or not. So talking about accessibility, I mentioned the use of assistive technology. So we want to talk about what that means. And again, this is coming from the World Health Organization. And really, assistive technology enables and promotes inclusion, participation, especially of persons with a disability, aging populations, and people with non-communicable diseases. The purpose of these products is to maintain or improve the individual's functioning independence, therefore promoting their well-being. So the idea is, if I'm a person with a disability, by having this assistive technology, I'm able to maintain my functioning or improve my functioning and independence utilizing that assistive technology. So just quickly, some examples. And I just put this little thing to remind everyone that really assistive technology can be any product, equipment, or software that is used by people with disabilities to, again, increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities. So this could be something that's purchased. This could be something that's having to be modified or customized, or it could just be something that someone made, you know, in the back of their garage somewhere, right? Like when I used to work for K-12, you know, 3-ring binders were our greatest raised surfaces, or you know, pencil grips, things like that. So when we're talking about digital accessibility, we're going to look at just some examples of assistive technology here. Things like screen readers, right? This is a way that people who have visual impairments are able to navigate a computer screen, you know, by having the screen reader tell them what's on the screen, where they are in that screen. Refreshable Braille display. Again, this is providing that information that's on the screen in a Braille display for someone. So if they're reading Braille, it will pop up on their Braille display and change as the screen changes for them. Alternative navigation methods. Not everyone uses a mouse and keyboard. Not everyone is able to use a touch screen. So there's alternative methods that they may need to use, something like just using a keyboard or using their voice. Closed captions, right? That's something a lot of us are utilizing ourselves. Transcripts. So instead of just having the captions on the screen, having that as a document that you can review either while that video is playing or just separately. So if you don't want the video, you can just have all of that text at once. Magnification, dark mode or high contrast. So being able to change how that looks on your screen. And then we provided a nice link from WebAIM that provides some additional examples, actually shows you what some of these assistive technologies look like and how they're utilized. So we do encourage you to check those out later. All right, so we get to the fun part where we're going to start talking about our topic. And as we dive in, we always like to remember that, of course, accessibility is a journey. It's about progress, not perfection, because, you know, as we know, technology is always changing. So that means the accessibility is going to change with it too. So with that, we always like this quote from Maya Angelou. It says, "Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better." And with that, I am going to turn this over to Erica.
All right. So I am going to, after Jay's great introduction, always helpful as a refresher, even if you've been to previous betas, I'm going to jump into our topic for tonight, which is accessibility checkers. And if you've never heard what that phrase before, or you don't know what that means, an accessibility checker is a digital tool that can help you find potential accessibility errors on a website, and it works with the site's source code. That's where it's collecting all of its information. And if you are thinking to yourself, what did you just say? Like, I don't understand any of that. I am going to help bridge the gap a bit, I hope. I'm going to use an analogy with another piece of technology that you might have a bit more familiar with. I know I certainly do, which is the standard microwave oven. So we are going to talk about some of the things we need to think about when you use an accessibility checker or want to start using an accessibility checker, just like you have to learn how to use a microwave. So with that, we will jump into the next slide. All right, so just some things to know when you start working with a digital accessibility checker. First thing is human testing is required. Computers can't catch everything. Quite frankly, I don't know if we'd want them to. That would be a little unnerving. And again, with our microwave example, you know, there's got to be some human decision making when you are operating a microwave. You can put the food in the microwave, but it needs you to say, you know, what's the temperature, how much time, or is there a setting for this type of food, things like that. So you've got to work with the microwave. And then, you know, you also can take your food out and see if it's cooked all the way through, or if it's frozen in the middle and boiling on the edge. So you got to do some testing with the microwave and with the checker. And then we also have some considerations when you're thinking about which checker do I want to use, right? There's lots of different choices out there. There's no one perfect one. Really, these different tools work better for different needs, different types of organizations, different skill levels, just personal preferences. So when you start making these decisions, think about what standards or guidelines does this tool use? Most checkers operate off of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, which is an international set of guidelines about digital accessibility. But in the US, we have laws about government websites called Section 508, and those laws or regulations determine the digital accessibility requirements of government websites. And some checkers are specifically built around Section 508. So those might not necessarily be super extra beneficial to a private company or a nonprofit, unless you're working with the government. But if you are a government contractor, you really want a 508 checker. So different tools, different guidelines. Second, one of my favorite questions, is this free or am I going to have to pay for it? If the tool is not free, how much does it cost? Some of the tools that you have to pay for are a bit more robust. They can do different things, maybe some things that you really want to have and are willing to pay for. But there are plenty of free checkers out there too. And the nice thing about that is you can try as many of them as you like without spending any money. So you can familiarize yourself with several tools and see what your favorite is. Next, what platforms, such as browsers like Chrome or Firefox, or devices like a PC or a Mac or a smartphone, does this tool work on? Some tools are designed to work in a certain setting. So for example, some tools are online only. You would add a URL of a published website for them to check. And then some of them will live on your desktop and you can test code that you haven't published online yet. Some of the online tools work on certain browsers. So look at the requirements, the technical requirements before you start working with a checker. And then kind of feeding off of that previous question, can I test my work with this checker before it goes online? If you want to get a snapshot of the accessibility of a web page before you publish your work, you're going to want a tool that is not dependent on a live website in a browser. Does the tool only find problems or can it repair them too? I know I've asked this question of some people in my life. Do you just find problems or do you actually have a solution? But it's a very valid question for a checker. Most tools just find the problems, but some of them will offer suggestions or maybe even be able to repair them too. That's usually a more expensive tool that can do all those things. But if you're interested in that capability, there are some tools out there. And then the last question, but a very important question, is how do I get a report or feedback about my site? How does the checker explain to me what might be wrong? And how is that information set up? Is it very technical in the way it's described? Do I need to know the WCAG guidelines for that section by heart? Or is it more of a tool where things are expressed in a way that, you know, you don't need to be very technical to understand? So that's really the key question is here is, can I understand my feedback? And that's one of the nice things about trying out these different tools is you could try the same site in different tools, see what the feedback is that you get, and see what you're happiest with and what you can understand and work with. All right. So we're going to talk about some of the strengths of accessibility checkers and why they're great tools to use, why it's good to try them out and incorporate them into your digital accessibility knowledge. And we're going to bring back our microwave metaphor here for some help with these. So the first strength is efficiency. Accessibility checkers can review sites and find errors very quickly. They can go through the whole web page or sometimes a site in a matter of seconds. Whereas, and I'm raising my hand here because I've had to do this, if I write a line of code and I'm not sure if I've done it correctly, I have to read the whole thing and then think about it and maybe go on Stack Overflow and look up what I wrote and see if I got it right and then come back and try and fix it. But these accessibility checkers are moving very, very quickly. Just like a microwave cooks very quickly. You're not stirring something over the stove for 3 hours, boom, it's done in a few minutes. What kinds of things can an accessibility checker find? They can catch a variety of errors, which is very helpful. It's not like this checker only does alt text or this one only does headings. You can use one tool and get a big snapshot of your site. So things like missing alternative text, form controls that don't have a label, many types, but not all, but most types of contrast errors, or dead links. So links that look like a link, but they don't have a destination. And those are all really important things to catch. So these checkers really cover a lot of ground. And then another important consideration, not necessarily in terms of finding a specific error, but understanding web pages, your own or someone else's, is that accessibility checkers can give you an idea of the page structure. In the report or the feedback they give, these tools will talk about certain features and elements of the site. They'll talk about headings versus paragraphs, two different text elements that function very differently, and they can show you where they are. They can show you where the buttons and links are. Sometimes those things can get mixed up visually, but they can tell you where they are. So they're a great way to find out what's on my page, where is it, how is it organized, and is that the way I want it to be? And then a really great quote, and I believe this is from the University of Minnesota. Melissa found this quote for us, but I really think this is a great description of what these tools can do. Automated testing tools excel when the decision logic can be boiled down to a simple yes or no answer, and that answer can be determined using machine accessible data. And what this means, if that is kind of a high level definition, but I do like it a lot. This means that accessibility checkers really shine when they need to solve simple questions with all the answers in the site's code. So things like, okay, is there alt text here or no alt text? Is this a level 1 heading, level 2 heading, level 3. What heading is it next to? Boom, 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 just going through the code. And the nice thing is that all websites have many, many, many of these types of questions. Every site with a picture, every site with text, every site with buttons is going to have lots of these types of questions. So a really important tool to have. And kind of back to the microwave, a simple yes or no answer could be, is this popcorn or not? And then if you say, yes, I'm putting this on the popcorn setting and it's bag or microwave popcorn, they have preset everything to very quickly take your popcorn from unpopped to ready to eat. Now, with strengths comes some limitations, and there's no perfect tool in the world, including microwaves, right? Microwaves can't cook everything. They do a great job with leftovers or SpaghettiOs or things like that, but not for like your Thanksgiving turkey. That would not work. In the same vein, accessibility checkers don't work in every scenario, and sometimes they work best in combination with other strategies. So the first limitation is, if something passes the checkers test, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's accessible. They're going off the code, but there are certain things they can't tell. For example, clear language or plain language. It's typed into the website through HTML, but the checker can only tell if the paragraph element is set up correctly. It can't tell if the language of the text is going to be accessible for the visitor to read. In the same vein, there might be alt text, there might not be alt text. If there's alt text, the checker has no way to know if the alt text is actually descriptive of what's happening in the image, or if it's the dreaded file name by mistake. It just says, here's alt text, I think it's accessible. Conversely, sometimes checkers might say, there's no alt text here, that's not accessible. And it's a decorative image. You didn't want to put alt text there. And if you're wondering what I'm talking about, we do have a previous beta all about alternative text and images. If you're feeling stuck or you want a refresher, I recommend you check that out. But moving on to our next limitation. Oops, I think we went a little too far. Sorry, I should have phrased that better. You might get a false sense of security if you only go off of the checker results. Just because something has passed the checker or failed the checker doesn't mean that's the be all and end all. It really needs to have a human looking at those results. And that's why it's so important to understand your report. If in the case of clear language, these checkers may inaccurately portray a site or app as being fully accessible when there are errors that they can't detect. And one of the main features that can present a lot of errors that they can't check for is usability. And that's kind of, the usability refers to what happens when a person is using this website. So does the site work for people? A machine can't tell that. Just like a microwave can cook your food, but they can't tell you if it's too salty. And they can cook it for what they think is the right time, but they might not have gotten it hot enough for what you like, right? That's why you have to do chocolate chips in 10-second increments and keep checking and checking and checking, because they'll go from like solid to burnt really, really fast. That's a limitation that we learn to work with, just like accessibility checkers, although it does come in handy. And then as just like those chocolate chips require human review every 10 seconds and some stirring, accessibility checkers also require human review. Where do they need it? Here are some of the questions that a person really has to answer after you used an accessibility checker. Logical meaning. Does my content make sense? logical flow? Does my order of information on a website make sense? Tab order. Can you navigate to everything you need by using the tab key? Which is something that people will do if they don't use a mouse. Visible input focus. Is there a ring or a way to visually determine where my text is going to go if I'm about to enter text? Keyboard access, kind of going with tab order. Can you operate the site without a mouse? Or do you need a mouse to get to certain features? And then meaningful text alternatives, which means, does your alt text describe your images? Or is it not helpful? And then here's another great quote from Minnesota. To be effective, accessibility checkers should form part of a wider process, a comprehensive approach, including testing by people with different abilities and skills, as well as evaluation by individuals knowledgeable in the field of accessible web design is best. So this is not to say don't use an accessibility checker. You should, because they're so helpful. They're quick and efficient, and you'll learn so much about your website. But it's helpful to know what they can and can't do, and it's helpful to know what you need to do as part of the website's development to make sure that you're filling in the gaps and helping the tool work for you at its best. And I am going to send us on to Melissa, who's going to talk to us about how can we get started with some of these different checkers.
Excellent. Thank you, Erica. Next up, we're going to share some widely used accessibility checkers that offer a good place to start. We have links to these in the slides, as well as a recently published blog post on the Knowbility website. I've shared a link to that post in the chat. Next slide, please. We'll start with Wave. When it comes to creating accessible web content, one of my favorite sets of tools is Wave, the online web service, as well as the browser extensions. It's available at wave.webaim.org, which is where I'm going to navigate now and start my screen share. Jay or another colleague, can you check my screen share access?
Go ahead.
Awesome. And are you able to see my screen? It's the Wave. Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm on the Wave site, which is wave.webaim.org. Wave is developed and made available as a free community service by WebAIM, which is part of the Center for Persons with Disabilities at Utah State University. The information I'm about to share is also provided in the Introduction to Wave video and in text on the Wave website. So Wave is a free web accessibility evaluation tool that identifies ways to make a web page more accessible by providing visual feedback about its accessibility through icons and indicators. We probably sound like a broken record at this point, and that's okay. This is one of the key takeaways from this session. Wave cannot tell you if your web content is accessible. Only a human can do that, but it can help you evaluate the accessibility of your web content and teach you a little bit about accessibility along the way. Wave is relatively easy to use. To evaluate a page, you simply enter its address on the Wave website or navigate to the page you want to check and select the Wave browser extension icon in Edge, Firefox, or Chrome. So I'm going to use the Wave web page to do some evaluation. I'm opening up an example page, which is a press release published on the NASA website. So I'm pasting the URL for that site now and entering. After I hit enter, the page loads and Wave displays a new version of the page with embedded icons and indicators. And each icon, box, piece of information added by Wave presents some information about the accessibility of your page. Wave also presents a summary of its findings in a sidebar on the left of the window. These findings are organized into 6 categories: errors, contrast errors, alerts, features, structural elements, and ARIA. The category icons are color-coded and also have other visual cues to make them accessible to users who have difficulty distinguishing color. FYI, WAVE is also designed to be accessible to keyboard and screen reader users. In addition to this summary tab, there are 4 other panels within the sidebar: details, which I'm clicking on now, reference, structure, and contrast. So returning to the details now, that's the tab that follows summary. This provides a breakdown of every icon displayed on the page, grouped by category. I can also use this panel to jump to specific issues within the page and to hide or unhide categories of icons. So first, red errors indicate issues that will impact certain users with disabilities. These also indicate failures to meet requirements in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. Clicking on an icon in this details panel will highlight the location of the corresponding icon on the page. So I'm going to click the first error icon, missing form label, and the search box is highlighted. I'll click on the icon on the page to open a tooltip for the error. And in this case, WAVE has identified that a form control, the search box, does not have a corresponding label. Returning to the details panel, the next category is contrast errors. These are instances of very low contrast between foreground text and background colors. I'll come back to contrast in particular in a moment. Next are yellow alerts, indicating elements in the page that might cause accessibility issues. An evaluator, a human, has to determine the impact, if any, of alerts. For example, when I click the icon for the first alert, I see that WAVE has flagged an image as having long alternative text. Is this an accessibility issue? Maybe. WAVE is alerting me, the human, to the alternative text that is longer than normal. As the evaluator, I need to decide if that can or should be more succinct. Continuing with our next category of icons, green icons indicate features that will improve accessibility if they're implemented correctly. The first feature listed also relates to an image at the beginning of the press release. I'm going to click on that now. So WAVE has identified a linked image with alternative text. The alternative text, or alt attribute, is displayed next to the icon for easy review. So next to the NASA icon, the alt text NASA is displayed. Next to the photo caption that was flagged as having long alternative text previously, that alternative text is displayed. This is helpful because you can evaluate the alternative text in context. So you would review that image, its alt attribute value, any other nearby page elements, as well as the text that comes after the image. Blue structural elements come next in our left column. The first icon in this category indicates that the title of this press release has been marked or styled as a first level heading, which is correct. WAVE has also identified the presence of unordered lists, as well as several regions or landmarks. I'll come back to these regions in a moment. Finally, WAVE identifies where ARIA has been used with purple icons. Accessible rich internet applications, or ARIA, can be used to present important accessibility information to people with disabilities, but ARIA must be used very carefully. Unfortunately, a website can be less accessible when ARIA is used incorrectly than it would be if ARIA were not present at all. So the first ARIA icon is grayed out a bit, faded out a bit, indicating that it relates to a part of the page that is hidden right now. This is something to keep in mind when using Wave, as well as other web accessibility checkers. Most pages have some content that is visually hidden. Sometimes an accessibility checker will identify an error in the site's code that is not actually an issue because it's not just being displayed to the site's user. For example, I often get the result of having poor color contrast because a web accessibility checker is finding color combinations in my site's CSS file that aren't actually visually presented to the user. What's presented has sufficient color contrast. This is why it's important to have a human discern if these issues actually exist. Also, multiple wave icons that apply to the same element might overlap each other. So there's a cool feature to use to make this a little easier to interpret. So in the top right corner of the page, we've got multiple wave icons kind of overlapping each other. They're definitely covering elements in the page. The search field in the upper right corner of the page is almost completely covered by these icons. So to see everything within the page, we can turn off the styles option at the top of the sidebar. I'm doing that now, navigating to the left sidebar and toggling styles from on to off. With styles disabled, none of the wave icons overlap, and analyzing the reading and navigation order of the page may be a little bit easier. I can now, after disabling the styles, see that a hidden label of search.nasa.gov was added to the search field, probably with the intent of improving accessibility for screen reader users. Right next to this label is an alert icon. Remember, alerts are things that a human needs to consider to determine if there's actually an issue. I'm going to click on that alert icon, and the tooltip provides me with a short explanation, orphaned form label. So no matter which icon or indicator you click, this is the pattern that follows. Click on the icon or indicator, and then you get a brief tooltip with a short explanation. In this case, orphan form label. If I were unclear on what this meant or what to do to address it, I would click the reference link in the tooltip. And this will open up the next panel in the sidebar, which is reference. And in this case, the panel explains how an orphan form label may impact people with disabilities, what to do to fix it, the algorithm that was used to detect it, and links to relevant web content accessibility guidelines requirements. So I mentioned that when I click on this icon, the tooltip identifies the error as orphaned form label. It looks like something went wrong when the hidden label was added to the search field. To see exactly what went wrong, I'll need to see the page's code, which is easy to do with Wave. So from the tooltip, I can select code. A code panel opens at the bottom of the window. The place in the code where the issue appears is highlighted with the orphaned form label icon. And reviewing the code reveals the problem. The label's for attribute and the input's ID attribute do not match, resulting in the label being orphaned and the input being unlabeled. If I keep the code panel open, I can click on any icon on the page or in the sidebar to jump to that location in the code. I'm going to turn my styles back on and demonstrate how that works with and without styles. So I opened up the code window to explore this particular form label issue, but if I click around on the page, the code window will update to take me to the relevant section of the code. This is particularly helpful if maybe you're the person checking to see if the content is accessible, but maybe not the person making the fixes. So if I were a content creator, let's say I post blogs to my organization's website, but I don't have access to the header or the footer or the widgets or anything like that, I might find this error copy the code and send it to my developer partner who is able to actually make those changes. That code view is very, very helpful. The next panel in the left sidebar is structure. And this panel shows page regions that have been identified with HTML or ARIA, like header for information repeated at the start of the page, of each page, main for the main page content, and footer at the end of the page. It also shows the heading structure for the page. Wave identifies any page elements that are hidden, like we saw before, or actually in this case, the header, main, footer, and it lists the regions and headings in order, indicating the nesting of any elements. So unfortunately, this page has issues in all of these areas. For example, the header, main, and footer regions are hidden in the page. They're hidden in a way that keeps them from providing any accessibility information. We can see this as a visual user because they're somewhat grayed out or faded. There's additional indicators for screen reader users. So the area that contains the main navigation comes after the footer in the code. It should be before it, nested in the header. And the heading structure that shows the main content comes after all the page regions, when it should be inside the main region. The final panel is contrast, and the icons within this panel identify text that does not meet WCAG level AA contrast requirements of at least 4.5 to 1 or 4.5 to 1. Wave also provides information for the lower 3:1 contrast requirement for large text. So I'm clicking on the icon in the contrast panel so we can see where exactly the problematic content is located in the page. I'm selecting that now. And it looks like the problematic content is near the top of the page. There is some text in white or very light blue labeled, yes, it's white, humans in space, that appears on a medium to light blue background. And Wave tells us that this is not sufficient contrast between the foreground text color and the background color. For normal text size, we get a WCAG 2.0 AA result of fail. So one way you can use this tool if your color does not pass contrast requirements is by adjusting the lightness slider to find a better combination of colors. In this case, I would probably start by adjusting the background color, making it a little darker to make it contrast better with the white foreground color text. And I can do that by adjusting the lightness slider until the result I get changes from a fail to a pass. So I'm going to do that now, just making some very small adjustments to make that color darker. And with just a very small change, I'm getting a pass result. If you notice on the right, when the actual page is displayed, as I move the slider, you can preview what that color contrast would look like. I mentioned to one of my colleagues in preparing for this webinar that I'm not a visual designer. I'm not very good at selecting color combinations that look good together, or I don't feel confident in my ability to do that. So I will often copy a color palette used by a popular brand or product, test it to see if it meets contrast requirements, and if it doesn't, make tiny adjustments until it does. So that's my color design hack. That is the final panel, contrast, and it's powered by WebAIM's color contrast checker. This is also available as a standalone tool that we'll look at momentarily. Should note that Wave cannot detect all contrast issues. Manual testing is required for things like images with text in them, and when elements with transparency or background gradients are present. So the analysis available at wave.webaim.org is very valuable, but it may not always show everything that can be detected by Wave, especially some types of content added with JavaScript. So for example, if I open up this NASA webpage directly, which I'm doing now, there is a main site element on the left sidebar that's loaded dynamically with JavaScript. So there's some latest and related content. That is visible when I load the page. However, it disappears when I attempt to use Wave to evaluate the page's accessibility. In this case, I might instead use the Wave browser extension, which can run directly in Edge, Chrome, or Firefox and test this type of content. So I'm going to the NASA webpage. I've already installed and activated the Wave browser extension in my browser, which is Chrome. So I'm selecting that icon now to begin the analysis, and the page reloads. But this time we actually see a little bit more information than we did when we tested the site at the Wave WebAIM URL. So know that you may get slightly different results. If you know that you have content that's loaded dynamically in the browser extension may be a better choice. The browser extension may also be a better choice if you need to evaluate password protected content or local pages. So HTML files that live on your computer or server because you're developing a website, but you haven't published them yet. You could open them in your browser and use this tool to evaluate them. I clicked on the browser extension visually to start it, but it is also accessible via keyboard shortcut. So that is our live demonstration of Wave. I'd like to, if possible, stop my share and return to the slides and navigate to the next slide, which covers a different type of accessibility tool. So Wave can be used to help determine the accessibility of your web content. The next tools are for checking specific types of digital content that may or may not end up on the web, such as documents or evaluating color contrast, which is applicable across mediums. Yes, websites and documents, but also things like social media content, digital signage, and so on. So like the Microsoft Office spelling checker tells you about possible spelling errors, the accessibility checker in Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, and other Microsoft 365 apps tells you about possible accessibility issues in your Office files. The tool generates a report of issues that could make your content difficult for people with disabilities to understand, explains why you should fix these issues, and describes step-by-step how to fix them. In newer versions of Office, including Office 365, you can access the accessibility checker via the Review tab alongside the grammar and spelling tools. In older or other versions, you may need to go to the File tab, then select Info, check for issues, check accessibility. Next slide, please. The next tool I'd like to introduce you to is the Adobe Acrobat Pro Full Check Accessibility Check. Adobe Acrobat Pro, which is a paid software provided by Adobe. It is not the same as the free reader software used to read PDFs on your computer. It's used to create and edit PDFs. Adobe Acrobat Pro offers a couple tools to assist authors in creating PDFs that are as accessible as possible. The Full Check Accessibility Check tool and the Make Accessible action. The Full Check feature in Acrobat checks the PDF for many of the characteristics of accessible PDF. The presence of actual text that you can select with your mouse and search within. The presence of tags, which help provide structure for navigation and assist in determining the reading order. This tool will check for those characteristics that are vital to ensuring PDF content is accessible to all users. You can choose which accessibility problems to look for and how you want the results reported. Erica talked about one of the considerations when selecting accessibility tools being the way the results are presented. So the accessibility check in Adobe Acrobat Pro presents the results sort of in line where you can interact with them, like the Microsoft Office tool. but it also has the ability to generate a standalone report that you could share with someone independent of the document or connect to the document itself. Again, that can be really handy if maybe you're the person doing an evaluation for accessibility, but maybe not necessarily the person who will be making the changes. So maybe I'm tasked with ensuring my department's website is accessible. I track down a PDF, run the accessibility check, and determine there's some issues there. I could send the accessibility report to the owner of that PDF in order to assist them in making the necessary improvements. You can also use it to verify whether the document conforms to accessibility standards, such as PDF UA and WCAG 2.0. I'll add that in addition to this full check, accessibility check, Acrobat does provide other methods to evaluate PDF accessibility or begin to evaluate PDF accessibility. For example, using reflow view to quickly check the reading order. That may not necessarily present a reading order that's the same as what an assistive technology user would see. Using read out loud to experience the document as readers who use text-to-speech software conversion tool might hear it. Again, may not necessarily read the same thing that a screen reader user would read. Saving the document as accessible text and then reading the saved file in word processing application. This can allow you to somewhat emulate what a end user who received Braille printed content would hear, for example. Finally, document authors can use the reading order tool, order, tags, and content panels to examine the structure, reading order, and contents of a PDF. PDF accessibility is complex, and it is very difficult to make a PDF that is fully accessible to all users. However, there are different tools available within Acrobat that can assist in doing so. Can we go to the next slide, please, Jay? So the next couple of tools can assist in determining color contrast. In order to be perceivable, the color of your foreground text needs to be significantly different than the color of the background on which it appears. There are several tools you can use to check for sufficient contrast. Many authoring tools, particularly graphic design tools, now have these features built in. But one of the oldest and one of my favorites is the WebAIM Color Contrast Checker, which not only lets you check to see if your color contrast choices or your color choices meet the contrast requirements specified by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but it also helps you pick color combinations that provide sufficient contrast. And we got a preview of that in using Wave. Using the standalone tool, you enter the hexadecimal codes for the background and foreground colors. These are also sometimes known as web color codes. And if your color combination fails to pass the test, you can adjust the lightness slider to modify the colors by slight degrees until you get a result that has sufficient contrast. I like this tool for its ease of use. The next tool, another one I like, is TPGI's Color Contrast Analyzer, a screenshot of which now appears on the slide. It works on the web and with documents and images on your computer. You can enter hex codes to check or use an eyedropper tool to select colors to check. So both of these tools are free and relatively equivalent in their ease of use. I like the WebAIM checker when I already know the web color codes for the colors I intend to use and just need to ensure the color scheme I'm building is accessible. I like the TPGI tool when the colors I need to check are not, I don't know the hex color codes. Maybe I know a different code like the RGB, which this tool supports, or I need to use an eyedropper to select the codes. This tool is also really helpful when the colors I need to check are contained in a file that's saved on my computer, or if it's difficult to determine the color of something. For example, in the case of a gradient or other overlay on top of a photograph, that may not necessarily be a solid color for which I can easily identify a code. Instead, I can use that little eyedropper tool to make sure what I have created is accessible. All right, so at this point, we have a little bit of time for you to do some practice using the accessibility checker of your choice to evaluate the accessibility of a site or other content that you choose. I'm going to start looking at some questions in the chat while folks are doing that, but we'll just take a few minutes to let you use Wave to evaluate a site that you own or use, or if you're an Office user and haven't used the accessibility check before, check that out with the document. Same goes for Adobe Acrobat Pro or the color contrast checkers. We'll take some time now for you to explore those.
And while you all are doing that, I just went ahead and re-entered the TPGI color contrast checker link, as well as the WebAIM contrast checker link. And then I also put in the Wave WebAIM, the tool that Melissa walked us through. So those are all in the chat right now. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll give everybody a couple more minutes to check out the different tools, but again, don't feel like you have to wait until the very, very end to drop your questions in now. And maybe you're clicking through something, maybe you've gotten lost. That's what we're here for. So.
All right, so we encourage you to practice, whether it's now as we transition to the end of our session or in the days and weeks following. Would love to hear your thoughts on the accessibility checkers that you try, and any remaining questions that you might have. Feel free to reach out to us through the Knowbility channels. Julianne, let's go ahead and talk a bit about other next steps and resources.
All righty, hello. Interested in learning more? Well, we found some following resources for you, some links. The first one is the Accessibility Evaluation Tools from WebAIM. It's a reader-friendly article. It has reader-friendly article to help you choose appropriate evaluation tools for your purpose. Selected Web Accessibility Evaluation Tools from WC3. It's an article, video, and links to help you evaluate tools for your web accessibility. The next one is Web Accessibility Tool List, W3C's alphabetized list of accessibility tools and links. So next steps, more advanced tools our learning team likes, or our team likes. Our accessibility service team finds the following link tools particularly useful. They can be found in the Web Accessibility Evaluation Tool List from the W3C or these links on the image. Andy, accessible name and a description indicator, accessibility and Section 508 checker from the Social Security Administration. I really like this one. Paul J. Adams, JavaScript bookmarklets for accessibility testing, and his A11Y tools extension for Safari and Mac OS uses JavaScript to highlight roles, states, and properties of the accessibility elements on the page. Accessibility Insights for the web, a browser extension and desktop tool allowing you to run tests of web pages and web applications. Web Developer. This browser extension adds a toolbar button to the browser with various web developer tools. Tab A11Y calculates the tab order of all elements and displays it visually, either by drawing a path or by highlighting the elements. And Lighthouse, it runs a barrage of tests against your page and generates a report providing you with places to improve your application. So I know that was a lot of links. We've covered a lot today, and we've provided you with many links as resources, which you'll be able to access when you get to the slides and whatnot afterwards. So now that we've poured all this information into your brains, do you have any questions? Please unmute and ask what you've got. All right, if there's no questions, or you may be typing, and that's okay, we can come back to that. So as we come to the last little bit of our time today, we would love to get your feedback. Please fill out the survey so we may know how we're doing and where we can further support your journey. The link is https://bit.ly/B,A. So that's https://bit.ly/oct-beta or beta. So we would love to have you fill that out so that we know where we're going.
And we do have a quick question here. It says, does or can Knowbility conduct user testing with a website that's at the designer stage right now? And when or what stage would you conduct user testing? And so Erica or Julianne, you want to take that one?
Well,
I'm happy to answer that question. Sorry, give me 1 sec. Sorry about that. So that's a really good question. When do you do user testing with your website design stage? So the answer is you can do user testing at any stage that you prefer. And it's great to do it through the full design cycle, but it's important to consider what is going into the test and how you're going to do the testing. So for example, when you're still designing the site and you might not have as much of a page as you would like people to go through fully, doesn't mean you can't test. You might ask people, okay, so if you were going to visit a page called, join our volunteer community, let's say, you might interview people and say, what would you expect to see on a page, something like that. You can also do something called card sorting, which is where you take the pages and categories of information that you're planning to have, and you can give them to people who might be potential users, and they practice, or they sort them out how they think they should go, what's logical to them. And that can inform you what people find to be logical, how you might want to set up the site. There are a couple other options, well, lots of options. I'm going to put a link in the chat in a little bit for a group called Nielsen Norman. They do all types of user research, and they'll have information about testing at all phases of the site, the design cycle. But If you want people to actually test the website and go through it with assistive technology, really having at least a few fully coded pages where people could go through all the steps of like registration for something or whatever you want them to test is pretty key, because otherwise they'll miss some of the information. But you can test at any stage. You just need to adjust your test to be appropriate for the amount of content that you have. And I'm going to go looking for that link and mute myself because y'all are bearing with me very well as I move around in search of Wi-Fi and quiet.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I need to be able to talk to somebody at Knowbility. I've been sending text messages, emails, but soon I'm going to have to talk with someone to get some sort of granular guidance on this, because I'm getting close to publishing this thing. And what I don't want to do is insult my designer or make my designer think that I'm a fool or I'm a heavy-handed person. I want to be a good, knowledgeable consumer. I want to work with him like a hand in a glove, and I don't want to make assumptions. So I just need to know, you got a big staff there. I just need to be able to have someone that I can call and chit chat for 5 or 10 minutes for guidance on, sort of like, how do you manage your, it's not like how do you manage your garage mechanic or how do you manage your priest, but it is trying to manage someone who does things that you don't do.
I would say probably if you want to, and I'll put up an email. I think we've got an email that will take more directly to, I think, some of your inquiries, and so we'll get that up there.
Okay.
Worst case, you can always do events at Knowbility. One of us will get that and pass it on over to whoever we need to. But
just send me an email giving me a point person, like human being with a name.
Sure, not a problem. We could do that.
Okay.
And then for those of you, we did have another question about any tools for mobile checking, and Melissa did put some of those in the chat as well. And we'll make sure that if those aren't already in our slides, we'll make sure that those get added when we publish the slides to the website. All right. Ready to take us home, Julianne?
I am. So our next session, Being a Digital Ally, BADA, B-A-D-A, is on the third Thursday of each month. Our next session, Being an Ally in Your Organization, is scheduled for Thursday, November 17th from 5 to 6:30 p.m. Central Time. When you arrive at the BADA page, find the November workshop and click the Register Through Humanitics button. And the website is let me go back. So the link there is https:// Knowbility, KNOWBILITY.org /D digital, so capital DIGITAL, capital ALLY. So Digital Ally is the last portion. I'm ready for the next one. And if you're excited and want to learn more about the K-12 space or all sorts of wonderful stuff, I learned stuff attending the Toolkit Tuesday. So even though I'm not in the education space currently, there was useful information there. We have a free monthly webinar focused on making K-12 spaces accessible. Sorry, I'm on the wrong slide on my own notes. Give me just a second. So the next one is Tuesday, October 25th. That's next Tuesday, 2022 from 12 to 1 Central Time. The title is Blending AT into UDL and MTSS. Now, for the rest of us not in the K-12 space, that translates into blending assistive technology into universal design for learning and multi-tiered system support. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read the link. Is that a straight?
No, it's just a descriptive link. So I'll get the actual link in the chat.
Okay, so the descriptive link is Toolkit Tuesday at Knowbility, but we'll drop the actual link in the chat. And finally, Thank you. Knowbility's community programs, including today's workshop, are funded by donors like you. Your generosity supports our work in digital equality for people with disabilities. If you're inspired to make a gift, please visit knowbility.org/donate. Again, that's knowbility.org/donate, DONATE, and I believe the D is capitalized. And lastly, thank you. It's been great having y'all join us today. Have a great few weeks and see you next time.